Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order of the Provo Municipal Council. 5:30 p.m. Tuesday, February 28th, 2023. Meetings of the Municipal Council are being held in hybrid fashion. That is, members of the public can view council meetings on YouTube and Facebook, or they may attend in person in the council chambers at Provo City Hall. I remind participants to mute your microphone when not speaking to minimize the potential for background noises and conversations to be picked up, recorded, and broadcast. I'd like to recognize Councilor on the stand. We have Councilor Ellsworth, Councilor Handley, Councilor Shipley, Councilor Whipple, myself, Councilor McKay, Councilor Fillmore, and we have Wayne Parker, Brian, and our Executive Director, Justin. Today's opening prayer will be provided by Becky Bogdan.
Our dear kind Father in heaven, we're very grateful for this day and for the moisture that we've received. We're very grateful for the opportunity that we have to be here. Please bless that our minds can be open and that the decisions that the council needs to make, that they can understand and make the best choices for our city. Again, we're very grateful for all that thou dost do for us, and we say these things in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
The Pledge of Allegiance will be provided by Councilor McKay.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
As indicated on the screen, a required public hearing will be held for certain agenda items prior to council action. After each such item has been presented, time to comment will be provided for all those who wish to speak. For items that do not require a public hearing, public comment will still be taken following presentation of the item, but will be limited to 10 minutes. At this time, up to 15 minutes have been set aside for an open public comment period, which is intended to allow comments on matters that do not appear on the agenda. Persons who speak during this time to an item that is on the agenda will not normally be afforded a second opportunity to speak during the comment period specific to that item. During any public comment period, each speaker will generally be limited to 2 minutes. Due to noticing requirements, no formal action will be taken in this meeting on matters that do not appear on the agenda. Those with comments are invited to approach the podium. Those participating on Zoom will need to use the raise hand feature to indicate their wish to comment. The chair may choose to alternate between in-person and online commenters. Please begin your comments by stating your name and city of residence. You will have 2 minutes to speak. Anyone who'd like to comment is welcome to come up. All right, I don't see anyone online. We will continue. First of all, we have a presentation of the giving machine donations to local nonprofit organizations. And this is going to be presented by Mark Seastrand, the Director of Utah County Communications for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and Karen Ellingson, Utah County Communications Counsel for the church.
Good evening, and thank you for allowing us to be here tonight with you. Mark is unable to make it tonight, so it's just me, and I'm happy to see you. Some of you I know more than others. Also with me here tonight is my husband, Brent Ellingson, who also serves on the Utah County Communications Council, and we have Stephanie Ashcraft, Tom Walker, Joanne, and Pam and Steve Beauchard also with us, and there are a few other members who weren't able to make it tonight. One of the many things that we do as a communications council was to be involved with the giving machines, which you may have seen up at the University Mall. And tonight we'd like to share with you some things about that project and what the outcomes were of all those wonderful donations that came in. And here to tell us more about that is Carl Cheney, who is here from the missionary department at the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And he was specifically over the giving machines. So we'd like to invite him to come up.
Good evening. It is a great pleasure to be here. My name is Carl Cheney. I am with the Missionary Department for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And my primary responsibility is to manage the worldwide efforts for the Light the World Giving Machine initiative. This past year, giving machines were found in more locations than ever before. 28 cities had giving machines across 6 countries. Approximately 425,000 people came to a giving machine and purchased goods and services to assist those in need, whether it be individuals here in Utah County or across the world. A few months ago, I had an opportunity to visit some of these people in Moldova and Bosnia. And I have to tell you that it was one of those experiences that truly changes lives. These are people who all they're seeking is just a little bit of help to get them started, to become more self-sufficient and to care for those that they love. As I was with them, seeing how they care for their livestock or their beehives or whatever it might be, it was truly an incredible experience. This year in Orem, approximately 75,000 people came to visit a giving machine. 38,000 items or cards were purchased. This extends anywhere from meals to hygiene kits, clothing, school supplies, etc. Specifically, 12,000 individuals, children primarily, will receive educational assistance and supplies. Almost 319,000 meals were purchased and will be donated. Nearly 2,500 boxes of fresh food and other food has been donated. 303 people will receive a year's supply of food, whether that's a child or an adult, to care for them for a year. 4,500 people will receive bedding, blankets, sheets, pillows. 263 families who are dealing with domestic violence will have a safe place to call home for a period of time. So it is truly an honor to represent on behalf of the Orem organizing team for the Giving Machines, to represent the tremendous work, the great generosity of the people of Utah County. And I think actually a large applause is due. I'd like to invite up Bill Hulterstrom from the United Way of Utah County. Bill has a lot of work to do. We have provided him with new baby kits and educational toys and shoes and books for kids and the domestic violence. And so here, Bill, we would like to present you with a plaque. It includes all of the cards that were available.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is Karen McCandless here? Okay.
I'm Tom.
Tom Hogan
Yeah.
from Community Action Services and Food Bank. You've got a lot of work to do too.
We do.
Almost 303,000 meals you have to prepare. I hope
We're
your
ready.
kitchens,
We're ready. We're ready to go.
there's a Smith's right over somewhere here. And you've also got almost 4,800 take-home meals for a child.
Yes.
So we've got some well-fed some well-fed people in this community, and I'm so grateful. We too have a plaque here for you. Thank you. You know, $50 feeds or takes care of 100 meals, and $150 took care of 300 meals. That is remarkable. Brent Crane. Are you here? Oh. Provo Food and Care.
Owner Ryan Tuttle.
Nice to meet you. You likewise have a lot of work ahead of you.
We're ready.
Almost 2,000 pairs of socks need to be delivered, Santa. We've got a lot of seeds and shelter kits and 11,400 hot meals. And 131 people are going to receive a winter care package, which is clothing and jackets, sleeping bags, and all of that. So on behalf of the church and this awesome organizing team, thank you so much for your participation. We appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for coming. That was wonderful to hear, and it's a wonderful initiative. We're glad that we got to help so many people in the county, or that the whole organization did. All right, we are going to move on to a resolution transferring money from the general fund to the airport fund on an interfund loan payment to Energy. And this will be presented by our Director of Administrative Services, John Borgett.
Yes, thank you, Chair McKay and Honorable Council. We just mentioned to the residents and those watching that we had a discussion earlier today on this item in our work session. It has to do with an interfund loan that took place back in April of 2020 to purchase some property adjacent to the airport. That was a key purchase, and it was important that we took the appropriate time to do that. There was an interfund loan that was created between the airport and Energy. That interfund loan is based on a variable interest rate of the state pool rate, which is the same amount that Energy would have earned on that money had they not made the loan. This is the third payment of 10 payments. The loan started out at 4.9 million. It's now down to 3.4 after this payment. The plan with the loan was if the airport had the resources, that the airport would go ahead and pay the loan. But there was some knowledge at that time that we were ready to build and expand the airport, and it was going to take some time to get it to the level where it could. And so in the interim time, the general fund is covering the loan. There was also a discussion earlier today that there were two amounts of interest that were reported, one on the schedule and one on the actual resolution. I went back and checked. They were both pretty close to the same, but the amount that was in the resolution was the correct amount, and that's also what was noticed. So we should be fine and good to go that way. But otherwise, I'm happy to answer any questions. There was a good discussion about the airport in this earlier today.
Doesn't look like there's any questions.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we're going to open this up for public comment. Looks like we have no comments. Council discussion. Anyone want to say anything? All right, I'm going to call for a vote. Councillor Ellsworth.
Yes.
Councillor Fillmore.
Yes.
Councillor Hanley.
Yes.
Now, Travis is not online, is he? I do not see him. Okay. Councillor McKay, yes. Councillor Shipley
Yes.
and Councillor Whipple. Yes. And that passes unanimously, minus Travis Hoban, who is not here. We have an implied motion on an ordinance amending Provo City Code regarding standards for conditional uses, dance halls, citywide application. And this is going to be presented to us by Aaron Ardmore, a planning supervisor.
Thank you, council. This item was applied for by property owners downtown at 384 West Center Street. Let me highlight that property right here. If you're familiar, it used to be an English learning school and has been vacant for some time. They had applied for a business license for an event center dance hall and were denied that license due to regulations and standards on dance halls in this area. So when they got the business license denial, they came and talked to our staff and talked about different options, what they could do. In the end, they decided to apply for this text amendment. This text amendment applies to more than just their property. I think that's an important note. So currently, for background, this area in green on your map has specific rules that are different from those outside of this area in Provo City. In Provo City as a whole, for a dance hall or event center, there's a 400-foot buffer from elementary schools, public places, 1 and 2 family dwellings. In this green area currently, the code allows you to only be 200 feet away from those uses. So there are two ideas, there are two proposals with this text amendment. The first is to expand that area into this red section. So carrying it over from 300 west to 400 west and bordered by 200 north and 200 south. That's the first change that they would propose, which would include their property. I should note that there are approximately 23 1 and 2 family homes in this proposed additional area. The second part of their request is to, after increasing the area for the reduced standard, is to further reduce the standard from the 200-foot buffer to a 100-foot buffer. So those are the text amendments before you. So here's a little zoom in of the most current imagery we have for this area. You could see the new city hall, the Covey Center for the Arts, some retail and restaurant uses within these few blocks. I wanted to show this because a lot of what staff and planning commission discussed was parking concerns with competing uses. The property that the applicants own has 19 off-street parking spaces. I am familiar enough with dance halls and event centers from being in code enforcement with this city to know that 19 cars is probably not enough for most events that are held in these kinds of halls. So the parking overflow would go to the on-street parking, and that would compete with the Covey Center for the Arts and those uses that you see on the map. That's one of the reasons that staff had some concerns about this. The other concern was, going back to this map, that reduced buffer would now apply to everything in the green and red square, which would potentially create some adverse impacts on residential neighborhoods adjacent to downtown. So those are kind of the main reasons why staff would recommend against making this proposal happen. The Planning Commission reviewed this as well, and in the end also recommended denial. Let me see if I have anything else that I wanted to speak to. No, I believe that is all. So if you have any questions for me, I'd try to answer those.
Counselor Ellsworth.
Thanks. I missed it earlier today when this was presented, but do you know if we frequently or how often we get complaints from dance halls about dance halls?
It's a good question. There's actually an issue right now in another event center in the city. I probably shouldn't give out the location.
Sure.
But there's been regular concerns with frequent police calls, littering, nuisance with noise and stuff like that. And it's been an ongoing issue for a few months, and the city's trying to figure out strategies to combat and to resolve those issues at another event center. So not all of them, of course, are that way. There's plenty of event spaces in the city that are responsible and do well. and then follow the codes and regulations. But yes, that can be problematic.
Okay. And then the exception in the green area, that's just for dance halls in the code?
Yes, so that section referenced on the top of the screen, that describes that physical boundary. And that physical boundary allows you to reduce that typical standard from 400 down to 200.
Do you know why it was drawn that way? Like, that's not that's a version of downtown, but that's not every
Right.
version of downtown. So do you know where it originated?
I don't
Okay.
have the background on how that came to be.
Okay, thanks.
Counselor Shipley.
I wonder what the rationale is for 200 feet. I mean, I guess I don't know offhand, like if 200 versus 400 when it comes to sound coming from a building, or, is that the primary issue for the buffer, or is it a parking and having people gather right next to a private property that is the issue? I mean, what was the original rationale, and then the difference between those two numbers? Help me understand.
Yeah, good question. As staff, we commonly get questions about why the code is the code. And it's always difficult for staff to answer because most of it was adopted by councils before we even got to the city. I can imagine, so 200 feet is about a half block, half of a Provo City block. I'd imagine it has a combination of those things: noise, pollution, right? So if you're right next door, it's going to be really hard for an event center to hold any type of event and not break the decibel allowances for that use. But in that section is also parking. So with that buffer, there's also a subsection of that says, in addition to this buffer, the parking for the use has to stay in that area. So I think it's maybe both of those.
Say about 200 feet is about a half a block. So in
Yeah.
essence, if you put 200 feet, you're basically saying if there's any 1 or 2 family homes in a block, you can't have. I mean, is it basically?
That's kind of how
Could
the
have been
current
a
code
previous-
reads, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Quick question there.
Counselor Ellsworth.
So the buffer adjacent to the Provo River is 100 feet for development, right?
In most cases, yeah. But I mean, now that there was amendments done, you can go down to 40. But yes,
So
for the
you can-
majority, it's 100.
Okay, that's just an interesting comparison for me that you can build as close to 100 or 40 feet to the Provo River, but this is 200 to 400 feet.
Right.
Counselor Whipple.
Do you know why they included the northmost and the southmost block in that additional area? Because it seems like you're adding a lot of residences. And if they'd only done the 2 blocks on either side of Center Street, this would have had much less impact on homes.
That's a good point. I think you could ask the applicant that. I would assume they were just trying to use that same north and south boundary that's written in the code, but they can confirm that.
And you mentioned something about the noise. Do we often have calls for the police to enforce the noise ordinance around dance halls? Like, is their decibel level too loud outside of their facility, or is it too late into the night?
There have been calls of those types for some of the dance halls. The one I referenced earlier is one example. But like I said earlier, I mean, there's good ones and there's bad ones.
Counselor Hanley.
Can you tell me what is a dance hall the same thing as a dance studio, or do we
No,
know for
that's-
sure what would be the use here?
Yeah, that's according to Provo City, how they regulate land use, that'd be a different land use and it wouldn't be regulated by this
And
section.
what is the distinction?
That would go under educational uses, while this is more of an event hall type use.
And what would the hours of operation be do we know? for a
this use?
dance hall? I mean, this is just a zone change or amendment, but we don't know, we're not getting any specifics about what's going to actually go in there.
They do have a business plan. I think they'll introduce that to you
Okay.
when it's their turn to speak. There are limited hours in the code on dance halls.
And what are those hours?
Let me find those real quick. Sorry, I apologize. I believe it's in Title IX, and if I remember right, it's either 10 p.m. or 11 p.m.
Okay.
is where the cutoff is.
I mean, I guess if we're going to hear a business plan, I'm just curious because it has to do, I was asking you earlier if, if the intention, if the use of the building is going to be at its highest in the evenings as opposed to during the day, it raises a different set of questions in my mind about parking. It also raises different questions about noise, but I'm just curious
All right.
if we know when it would be used primarily. So
Sure.
I'll look for that.
Counselor Fillmore.
Aaron, you indicated earlier that the planning department recommended against it. And you named a couple of reasons for that. What was the vote on the planning commission?
Planning Commission voted 5-0 to recommend denial
Against it.
against it.
And what were their reasons?
Very similar to staff's. They weren't so concerned about the noise. They talked a bit about best use of the property, being on Center Street. Maybe there's better retail type uses that can go on that spot that has off-street parking, where there's not a lot of properties on this section of the city that has off-street parking. And then they talked about mainly the adverse impacts on the neighborhoods of residential properties nearby.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
All right, are we going to hear Counselor Whipple?
Sorry. Did Downtown Provo Inc. or Quinn Peterson get a chance to weigh in on this?
I didn't receive any feedback on this item from that neighborhood chair. No.
Was that solicited?
Notice was sent, and this was kind of right during the transition from the old neighborhood program to the district program. So that might have been the reason. So.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so we're going to
Thank
hear
you.
from the applicant now.
Good evening, everyone. My name is David Kong. This is here my son, Sean. It's always a little nervous to stand here and talk, but I'm grateful that we live in a system that allows this kind of dialogue to take place. And I feel very grateful for that opportunity. My wife and I, June, have been living here since our college days in BYU. Our first introduction to downtown area was back in 2011. Working with Downtown Alliance at the time, and with the help from the Provo City, we were able to transform a space that's 68 West Center Street. This was before the Provo City Provo City Temple was announced. So we had a chance to work closely with the city people at the time. So really had a good experience with that. And I think this is part of our American dream, a chance to own a property. And we had good experience, some challenging experiences as well. But with the help from city and other folks, we were able to make things happen. So the property that we have acquired used to be a language school. And the people that have, and working with Quinn and others, we've sought input from civic, commercial, and other groups. But for one reason or another, these opportunities or options didn't materialize. And we kept coming back to this idea of event center, but there was no designation called the event center in the city code. So that the closest match we were told was the dance hall. So even though we're using those words interchangeably, the people that have contacted us have indicated they want to teach ballroom dance, and the ballroom lessons, in addition, they would hold dance competitions. So that would be probably the most case where the group will be large. But one thing about the parking issue is that since most of the events will be held, the large events will be held in the evening hours, we believe that we actually are adding 19 parking spaces that Aaron mentioned. So we believe this is a best use for the moment from our perspective, but we're open to your suggestions. And as Councilman Whipple mentioned, we were guided on those area designations, and we're certainly open to reducing that if that makes this process more amenable to everyone. So the process of owning has been a great journey, and we'd like to keep that journey going. And with your help and understanding, we'd like to have a solution that works for everyone involved. So thank you for your time, and I'm open to questions.
Yep. Counselor Shipley.
So as you were working with staff, was the difference of the 200 and 100 feet necessary for your specific property to be able to operate as a dance hall? Or was that, I mean, I assume that it was necessary to reduce that distance in order to have your dance hall there, but I just wonder what the rationale for the 200 to 100 discussion was.
And I believe that was the case because there are single and double residences near our property that require that. But again, I'm kind of new to this area as far as text amendments and ordinances. So we were helped along this way, but maybe I didn't fully understand the ramifications of those statements, but that was our understanding at the time. Yeah.
Could I add?
Counselor Fillmore.
As the owner of this property, which is really prime real estate downtown, it's potentially part of the ongoing rejuvenation of the downtown area that's been going on for the last 15, 20 years. It strikes me that this particular property is really amenable to a variety of developments, some really high-end, high-yield kind of developments. Have you explored other options besides the dance hall?
Yes, we have. And we have owned this property for 18 months now. As a small business owner, we are obligated to make some monthly payments. And 18 months is a long time for us anyway, as a business owner. So yes, we understand, and we really love to be part of the future of this corridor, which I believe will be, I don't know what the old city building will turn into, but that's exciting. I think it would be very exciting event when that's finalized. So yes, the question that you asked is, have we looked at other opportunities? As I mentioned, we had a lot of inputs, and we have dealt with a number of retail as well as food court ideas. But as the current building is, it seemed to lend itself best to dance studio, dance, and a wedding type of situation. So the last people that we have and they're ready to sign is a dance studio type of operation. Yeah, but we're really open to other options, but we also have obligation to meet with the bank and others.
Okay, well, I'd love to visit with you afterwards, perhaps, to give you some ideas as to other alternatives that might be far more lucrative for you, but that's another matter.
Sean, did you want to say something?
Yes. Again, thankful to be here today. Honestly, just grateful to live in a society where we can even have this kind of dialogue, like my father was saying. I just wanted to add a little bit of color around our current situation. We have, as you may drive by, it's currently called Gardenia Event Center. We had a tenant with us, and we checked with the zoning, and as they were going to apply for their business license, that's when the trip up occurred. And they're like, wait a second, you actually can't be doing an event center. And this was months into their agreement with us. And so all of a sudden, Gardenia couldn't become an event center. And we started chasing down this path of like, okay, what would it take for this building to become an event center? And in that process, we actually had another tenant who was willing to sign the dotted line as soon as we got the text amendment changed. And so, you know, being a son to my parents, like this was a great opportunity for them to own property on Center Street, to make it a better area, a better location. And, we keep running up against, this text amendment that, hey, like, this isn't really, I apologize. All I'm asking for is your consideration in helping my parents. We aren't really politicians. We aren't really zoning people, but we are bringing parking to the table. And I know that that's not exactly what the text amendment is about, but the text amendment, as we see it, really allows our property to be treated like a downtown property. And that's what we're really asking for today.
Counselor Hanley.
Well, this is actually maybe a question for Aaron, to going back to my question about dance studio versus dance hall. If the proposal is to provide dance instruction and occasional competitions, why is that not considered a dance studio?
So it was our understanding that the applicants, potential tenants, would run a dance studio during the day, but to supplement that income to make this work for them, they needed to have it be like a rental hall for evenings and weekends. And that part of the business license is the issue.
Okay, but but there's also the event center, so that's why I don't know what any of these distinctions really mean.
Yeah.
practically.
So event center, dance hall, reception center, those are all kind of treated the same.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So as long as that's part of their business plan, then they're running up against these codes.
Counselor Whipple.
So if they only wanted to do the dance lessons and they would be okay? If they want to do dance lessons and dance competitions, would they be okay? Okay, so it's only if they also need to rent it out as an event space that we need the zone change and that there's a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should probably come up and nod into the microphone.
That is all correct. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question here for Aaron? Sorry. Do we have event spaces downtown?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And tell me which ones I'm not thinking of them, but what exists downtown?
We have the White Shanty, we have the Blake.
Yeah. And then
I mean, those aren't like right on Center Street.
the
I'm
bell
thinking.
tower has been one, and the bell tower was on Center Street.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Southworth Hall?
Southworth Hall.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a number of them.
Okay.
I can't think of all of them. top of my
Sure.
head, but
Yeah. No, I'm just okay. But those are permitted uses given the zone that they're in.
right.
and
Yeah.
given
Well,
the
they're
code that we
conditional
have.
uses. So each one of these comes in as a conditional use.
Oh,
But what this group is running against is they can't even apply for the conditional use because there's regulations about distance to other uses.
right.
Right.
Okay. And aren't we trying to get away from conditional uses?
Yes, but that is still one of them.
Yeah. Gotcha. Okay. Thanks.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
I don't know if I'm allowed to speak up again.
Go ahead.
Thank you. As we saw earlier, we had the 4-block proposed expansion. We are willing to change that back down to like a 2-block expansion. So it's just the buildings touching Center Street directly. From my understanding, there's only 3 residential homes in that different area. The 4-block radius involves the 20 other homes, but knowing what we know now, we would be absolutely willing to change that text amendment if that is more pleasing.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, we'd like to open this up for public comment.
Becky Bogdan, Provo resident. First of all, the amount of complaints that I have received over the years from loud bass music, from people with young children, older people, and people with pets is incredible from the mall. And I have heard off of good word that the dance hall that is currently up by Quick Clack is a nightmare, and they get a lot of police calls there. So as a resident, I would prefer not to have anything like that near my home or even within more than 400 feet. Because the phone calls I get, they come from way far south and way far west than even where the mall is. So I hope that helps.
Thank you. Any other public comments? All right, we will have council discussion. Now this, as we said, this was heard by the Planning Commission on February 8th, and this is the first hearing. Councilor Whipple.
I will just say that I was trying to look for an event space for an event on March 3rd, and they were already all booked like 2 months beforehand. So there is a huge need for these things in Provo.
I have a few thoughts on it. I lived by 7 Peaks Water Park, and the noise thing is real. And yeah, I remember my kids sleeping during the day, going to bed at night. It was rough. So we, like, the buffer is reduced downtown, as it should be, right, to 200 from 400, where it is in the rest of the city. And so I think reducing it even more is just, I question that, especially for the whole zone, considering that it's already been reduced, considering the downtown aspect of the area. And I think it's a big deal affecting homeowners' quality of life. Any other comments? Councillor Ellsworth.
Yeah, I like the idea of having more event space downtown. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that given just the nature of our community and that there's lots of events to be had in a college town, certainly a lot of weddings. It seems like there's definitely a demand for event space, and this is a terrific place to accommodate it in my mind. I'd like to be business friendly and find a solution for these owners. I guess I have an expectation of downtown as being an urban center and not being suburban. And if people were to buy a house on a block that was less than a block away from Center Street, they have some concept of urban living, and that there could be different noises or hours or people mulling around in front of their street at different hours that you wouldn't necessarily see in a suburban area. So to me, it seems like a good fit. I don't know if the text amendment is exactly the right solution, but I just don't know why we would discourage businesses from operating in a vacant building, especially downtown. I don't want to see any of these buildings vacant. I'd like to see them occupied and people coming in and out and money circulating through the economy, and both people patronizing the businesses and the owners served well by that commerce. So yeah, I really wish we were finding a better solution forward for the owners, because it doesn't seem like a detrimental use to downtown. And again, it's the urban center of our city. This is like really close to City Hall too, and where we intend to build a fire station, right? So you're going to get loud noises at all times of day if you live that close to a fire station. And again, we want people moving in and around in the downtown, even at night. So I wish we were finding a solution. I wish we were trying to be business friendly and support these downtown business owners.
Councillor Fillmore.
I just want to say to you folks, I find you a very sympathetic family and would love to see you have a successful project. But I can't escape the logic of the Planning Commission or the Planning Department on why they don't feel this is an appropriate use of that property. It really is prime real estate downtown. And there's so many other opportunities that would be far more lucrative for you, and it would fit the city's long-term plan for the redevelopment of Center Street. I would hope that you'd explore those other options seriously. Take a hard look at it for your own sake. So I'm going to have to vote against this.
Councillor Handley.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with the idea of the use that is proposed there, and I'm comfortable with text amendment if it were the lowest and upper corners were not included. I think it's entirely up to the property owners what they want to do with the property. And I don't see anything wrong with their proposed use, but it does seem like our definitions are creating a bit of a difficulty for them. And I don't know if we said, look, we'll approve a dance studio, how much that ends up creating problems for you in terms of being able to use it for a wedding or other kinds of events. So I'm wanting to find some sort of solution to that problem, because I don't see any threat whatsoever with teaching ballroom dance in that space and having some ballroom competitions. I think that's perfectly reasonable in this location, and I don't see that it's going to create any major problems. And I don't think that to the degree that it's going to be used more heavily in certain evenings, that creates a problem with parking, because a dance studio during the day doesn't seem to raise an issue at all with regard to parking. So I would like to find some slight amendments to this amendment to get it through, because I think it's close to being workable to my mind, close enough that we should be able to make it work.
I agree with you, George, that the dance and for dance competitions and dance lessons is fantastic, especially ballroom, where I don't think we have a lot of that. And there's a lot of ballroom people, young and old, in this city that would make use of that. I think we're talking to a different thing where they want it to be an event center where there's events later, and they go later than 10 o'clock. They go much later.
If I could clarify that,
Yeah.
Brian Jones was kind enough to come show me the code section that the police use for that. I wrote that down. It was Monday through Friday. There's no business allowed from 1 a.m. to 8 a.m. Saturday, 1:30 a.m. to 8 a.m.
Things go till 1 or 1:30.
Yeah.
And you could have any kind of event, music, dancing. What's the max capacity for such an event in that building?
So on this one, based on the off-street parking and the parking regulations of Provo City for that use, it would be 76 occupants for that building. If we're just talking about that 384 West Center.
Councilor Whipple.
What would be the maximum occupancy of people in the building based on the fire code?
I don't have that.
What? I stumped you?
Is the fire marshal? No, sorry.
Councilor Shipley.
So my hangup is this 100-foot thing. I don't know how to resolve that. And so it just, I guess the hard thing for me is if we blanket this entire area with a change to 100 feet, what are the unintended, I just can't get my mind around what unintended consequences there might be at the 100 feet for the whole thing. As far as you guys operating, with what you've proposed, I don't see any concern with that at all. I don't have any problem with that. And frankly, for us to be worried about noise, the noise difference between an event center and competitions in a dance studio, I mean, that's crazy. I'd love to see you guys have a breaker studio, and breakdancing studio there, because we don't have one of those in Provo yet. And the bass might be louder there than it would be with an event center. So I mean, it's just kind of strange to me that we're getting hung up on sound when we could have an approved use that could have just as much or more sound in that same spot. And the other hang up on the parking, I don't have a consideration for that at all. You could have a sign in the parking lot that says, we got all this free parking in the PEG, building. We got free parking at Zions and Wells. We've got free parking all over that people can walk a few blocks for if to get the people in there that can legally be there. So if I can find a way to reconcile this 100-foot thing for that entire zone, that's my only hang up at this point. I think George's comment about taking the 2 blocks off, I'd be supportive of that. I think I think that makes sense. Again, I just got to process this 100-foot thing, and it might it might mean that we need to discuss this one more time to have staff some time to really talk through this 100-foot issue and other consequences that might come up because of that.
Counselor Whipple.
Yeah, I think if we expanded the map a little bit, we might be able to see that kind of 100-foot buffer area around it to determine how many potential residents could be affected if the properties within 100 feet, especially on the border of the area, were to adopt this use. And not all properties within 100 foot of a residence could be converted into this sort of a dance hall. So I think that we could actually get real data to show what the potential impact of this change would be.
I'm hearing Counselor Hanley.
Sorry, I texted Quinn Peterson, and he said, we support the change. We have a need for more event space downtown, and it is already something allowed in the zone. I think that the request is reasonable. Anyway, but I would clarify that. I don't know what to do about the definition of the use with dance studio versus dance hall or event center. But I certainly would be willing to propose an amendment to the text amendment that would shrink the space down to the northern boundary at 100 north and the southern boundary at 100 south. But I don't know if that ends up resolving enough of the issues that my fellow counselors have with the proposal or not.
Do we have more questions we want answered and we want to consider this again? Is that, because I heard we already did.
We did.
Counselor Whipple.
So I would be supportive of this change without additional information with that slight adjustment of the boundary that George is proposing. So if there are enough counselors in favor of that, I'm happy to support that. If not, I would want the data that I just described if we do end up continuing this to another meeting. But I really think that with the support of downtown and the need for both the ballroom studio and more event space, this is something that we should be supportive of.
Counselor Ellsworth.
Yeah, I would support an amendment to the amendment if we could move this forward and create a solution for the applicant. Downtown, given the historic nature of downtown, so many business owners and property owners are working within the confines of something very historic. And I can think of a building in the broader downtown area that now has three different separate uses. It's a building that's at least 100 years old that we would not want to see raised. And the owners have improved it and taken care of it. And one of those uses may not be totally legal. That being said, it's not nefarious, and it definitely adds value not just to the home and the property, but to those around it and to the community by enhancing and restoring historic home. So all of that to say is that downtown needs to be an area where we can be flexible, where we can allow multiple uses, where we don't have code from the 1980s with some unusual definitions about dance hall, because no millennial and no Gen Z is going to a dance hall on Friday night. There needs to be some modernization and flexibility in our urban center in order to accommodate really worthy businesses that want to be there.
Do we have a motion?
Well, let me just add this. I can't vote yes for it until I get additional information on the 100 feet. So if that is the difference of what we need to do tonight, I just throw it out there.
I would, I don't know if I can make a motion. I mean, I was going to make a suggested motion about the boundary, but it sounds like there's other unresolved questions, and I'm wondering if we can just ask the applicants to go back to work with planning staff to find and maybe that would include an amendment to the amendment, an amendment to the boundary. And then we could get some more data and come
Yes.
back and look
Okay,
at
so
this.
we need to take out those 2 blocks, and then could we go over again the questions? Councilor Whipple, want to give the questions exactly that?
Well, before we do that, I have a question. If we have the applicants go back and change this, is that additional cost to them to do that? No. Okay, good. Thank you. All right. So my question was, can we quantify the number of residences that could potentially be affected by changing the distance to 100 feet and
expanding
expanding it, but just the 2 blocks instead of the 4 blocks? Noting that not all of the properties around the perimeter of those could be converted into a dance hall.
And while we're at it, Aaron, could we also get more specific info on like police calls or whatever issues have been from the other dance halls that you mentioned briefly?
Can I ask a question of staff? If there's a different amendment that comes back that the council feels good about, does this applicant still have to apply for a conditional use permit?
Yes.
Okay, so there's another layer to the process where we can ask for, or are the conditions set in the?
There's some standard conditions in
Uh-huh.
250. If there's additional health, safety, welfare concerns, we can mitigate with additional conditions
Okay,
if those arise.
okay. So there's a whole nother layer where additional conditions could be added.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And
Well,
yes,
Aaron?
I can bring back non-specific information, number of calls,
Yes,
types of calls.
right. We don't
Yeah.
need names, but
Very good.
could we also get information on how many people would be allowed in the building for fire code versus
Fire-
parking spots?
Got it. Yep.
And one last question I have is getting this other information, bringing it back to the next meeting that we can. How much longer is this process going to be for them? Because during this entire time, they have no revenue. And I don't want to starve them as we drag through this.
So they could, at their risk, apply for the conditional use permit right away, assuming that there's something done here that allows that to move forward. And that would save them a couple weeks at least as we wait for the next council hearing. That staff review time would coincide with that. And then it'd just be at the next administrative hearing. So that's those are twice a month. So I mean, it's a couple weeks. Yeah.
One thought too, couldn't they immediately start doing the ballroom dance classes and such?
Yeah, they could apply for separate business licenses at different times for separate uses. That's a possibility.
All right, any other questions you want to put to Aaron before we let him go? Okay, so what do I do in this case then? Do we?
Well, this is one of the ones, because it's a first hearing, it doesn't require a motion. I think that now is the time when you would ask if there are 2 counselors that would like to continue.
Okay, are there 2 counselors that would like to continue this item?
Yes.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, George. Shannon's making the motion and George is seconding it. So we will
Well,
continue.
it's not a
this.
motion, right? It's just 2 counselors.
Gotcha, sorry.
Just automatically continued by rule if there are
Great.
2.
Automatically continue. All right. The next, an applied motion on a request for approval of a zone map amendment from the ITOD zone to the TD1 general downtown zone in order to construct a new apartment building at 466 South, 100 West downtown. And this will be presented by our planner, Dustin Wright.
All right, thank you, council. Okay, here we go. So here's the property highlighted in red. The applicant is requesting to rezone from the interim transit-oriented development zone, the ITOD zone, to our downtown or general downtown DT1 zone. This map here shows the current zoning map on the property. Property here in purple is the ITOD zone that they're requesting to change to the DT1 that you can see is located to the north of it. The applicant's property that they're proposing to do this development on would incorporate the highlighted property as well as the property to the north. All of that property would be combined into one parcel for the development that they'd like to do. Our general plan map calls for transit-oriented development type designation, which the proposed project that they have would fit within that. Our downtown neighborhood plan has the future land use map shown here. The property has the red star on it over here, which is in the high density residential designation in our downtown master plan. So the proposed zone change fits within the general plan and the downtown master plan. And then here's the property outlined in yellow that would be combined into one parcel. And so that's the reason for this rezone, is to get the ITOD to match the DT1, so that once all the parcels are combined into one, that they would be able to have one congruent zone applied to them. So that's the request on this item, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Anyone have questions for Dustin? Well, that was easy. We'd like to open up this item for public comment. We have so many of you here today. We're so perplexed. No public comment. Well, it's nice to have an audience for change.
Is it a class assignment?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Like, all right. Well, y'all look lovely.
Is this the most exciting class assignment you've ever had? Yes.
Oh, that's funny. All right. Well, yes.
Make it interesting for the folks who came out tonight. What's the advantage or disadvantage of having the ITOD zone versus a DT1 zone?
Good question. They're pretty comparable. I think the proposed project would probably fit in either one. With that said, I haven't reviewed the proposed project to the ITOD zone, so I wouldn't feel comfortable recommending that we move forward doing that. But generally speaking, they're going to have pretty much the same density and height in a project. So I think the reason we chose, or the applicant chose to go with the DT1, is because the majority of the property was already DT1.
Okay, that makes sense. Thanks.
Dustin, what did the planning commission say?
The planning commission forwarded a positive recommendation. I think it was 6-0 to approve the rezone request, and they approved the so the applicant did a project plan instead of a concept plan, and they recommended approval on that, subject to this rezone being approved.
Councilor Shipley.
So sorry, something you said didn't make sense to me. Why would a developer want a different zone if they can do the same height, the same density, the same? I mean, obviously they're motivated by something that brings more profit to their project. So help us understand what we should know is the difference between those two and why they would be motivated to go through the hassle of getting the zone change.
So when they submitted it, they submitted the project plan, and staff pointed out that the overall area had the two different zones on it. So we said, you got to pick one zone to have it all zoned as, because it's going to have to be combined into one parcel, and we don't want to have one parcel have two different zoning designations. So like I said, I think it's because the ITOD was just these two parcels as opposed to the remaining parcels on the north. So it.
Maybe I can answer that question a little bit.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from, I assume you're the developer?
Yeah, I am. Jason Miller. There's 6 properties involved here. 5 of them are in the DT1 zone. 1 is in the ITOD. So it's combining all the properties together into one project, and it's got to meet one zone. So all lots will be consolidated into one. So it made the most sense for us on our project to do it in the DT1 zone.
So you already have plans? Is that what I heard?
We've gone through the project plan approval, so we've gone through engineering, all the departments, and we've passed that. We're approved all the way through that. We've met with staff, tried to meet all the requirements of the staff. So
I'm just curious, do you meet the parking requirements or did you guys?
we do.
Ah,
We do meet the parking requirements. We actually have 13 additional tandem
Oh,
stalls
so attractive.
that we're putting in. We can't count those towards it, but we've tried to help out with the parking on it. So,
Okay, thank you so
Okay.
much.
all right.
Any other questions or that from the council? All right, we did public comment. We didn't have any. Council discussion. Is there any more council discussion? Are we ready to take a vote? All right. Any two members want to continue this? All right. We are going to vote on the implied motion. So we'll start with Councillor Fillmore. He left us. All right, we're not going to do him. Councillor Whipple,
Yes.
Councillor Shipley,
Yes.
Councillor Hanley,
Yes.
Councillor McKay, yes. Councillor Ellsworth.
Yes.
And so that passes by unanimous vote, and we have Fillmore and Hoban excused. All right, well, this is the adjournment. We'll call for the adjournment of the Provo Municipal Council. If there's no objection, we will now adjourn by unanimous consent. Councilors, you'll want to turn on your mic and speak up if you object.